Welcome, and we are underway with this regular meeting of the Helotes City Council. It is July 9th, 2015, and we are in session at 7 p.m. Before we get started, I would like to ask anyone who has a cell phone or other electronic communication device, if you would please turn it to off, silent, or vibrate for us, and we appreciate it. And to start the agenda, we will have our invocation, and tonight that's going to be handled by Councilmember Blue, Alex Blue, and then we will have the pledges to the American and Texas flag. So if you would please stand for the invocation and pledges.
Heavenly Father, as we gather here this evening, we are thankful for your presence as we contemplate issues that will shape the future of our community. Help us to strike the right balance between short and long-term needs of our city so that we don't put one before the other. We ask for guidance as we work through tonight's agenda items. We also ask that you protect our police, firefighters, and all of our public servants as they work daily to make our community better for all of us. And finally, we ask that you provide guidance to our elected officials at every level, that they keep the citizens first in every decision they make. This we ask in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Okay, next on our agenda is the public hearing. We're going to open this public hearing at 7:02. And this public hearing is to give all interested persons the right to appear and be heard on amendments to the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 98 zoning, Section 98.4, definitions to define total lot surface area coverage permitted for accessory buildings, associated living quarters, and storage buildings. Grace, did we have anyone sign up to speak? Okay, with no one sign up to speak, we'll close this session again at 7:02. Open session, citizens to be heard. Anybody? No, sir. Okay, that takes us to our consent agenda, items 4 through 6. Typically, the consent agenda is intended to have multiple items that are considered fairly routine by not only me but staff, and hopefully have them approved in one motion and 1 second. However, council does have the opportunity to ask questions. If they can be answered briefly, we'll address those questions. Otherwise, they can pull an item for full discussion later in the agenda under individual items for consideration. So at this time, I'd ask council members, are there any questions about items 4 through 6, or a request to pull any of the items? None?
Mayor,
Okay.
it's actually four and five. There was a clerical error.
Oh, yeah, okay. That is correct. So we're talking consent agenda items 4 and 5. Again, no questions, no request to pull one, so I would ask for a motion and a second to approve items 4 and 5, consent agenda.
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve consent agenda items 4 and 5.
We have a motion from Byes. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Blue. So with a motion and a second, motion from Byes, a second from Blue to approve consent agenda items 4 and 5. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Consent agenda items 4 and 5 are approved. That then takes us to item number 6, item for individual discussion. And this is 2 new appointments, 2 vacancies on our Economic Development Corporation. And we've recommended to council for place 2, Kathy Oliver, whose term will expire September. She's going to be filling an unexpired term, and that's going to end in September 30th, 2016. And I did ask Kathy and then Carl to show up. So Kathy, if you'd come up front and just introduce yourself to the council and maybe tell them a little bit about yourself, and we'll see if they have any questions, and then we'll do the same with Carl.
Okay, well, thank you. welcome the opportunity to be here and be working with you. My husband Jerry and I have lived here now for 9 years. Time flies. And we've certainly, in the past, been active in helping campaign for city council representatives and tried to be active. Recently, we haven't been very active, but I look forward to the opportunity to working with those of you that are on the EDC and who do a fine job taking care of the business of the city of Helotes.
Thanks. Any questions?
Did you get my bio?
Yes, we
in there?
did, and they
Okay,
all have
so
it.
they really kind of know
Right.
what I'm about.
I just want to say thank you for stepping up to do this. And actually, the city council members are not going to be on the EDC anymore.
Oh, okay.
So you actually are taking, I think, was I?
Were you the
Yes.
last
Two,
one?
you're taking my place. And I just want to say that I'm glad a female is taking my place.
Girl power. Well,
But-
thank you.
And you, and so thank you very much.
Paul?
Thank you.
Bert?
Kathy, thank you. I've worked with Kathy a few years back on campaigns and stuff like that. She works hard, and I think she'll be a fine addition to the EDC.
Alex?
I would echo Councilmember Massey and say thank you for stepping up and being willing to participate and add to what we do here at the city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And we'll be acting on both of these at the same time. So next up will be Carl Hale. His term will end September of this year, and then if he chooses to be reappointed, he'd be reappointed for a 2-year term. I would like to just, before you get started, Carl, let everybody know that he's already, I met Carl at National Night Out in Iron Horse Canyon last year, and he was thinking about retiring at that time, and so I immediately brought up volunteering, and he stepped up, and he's been helping us working with the employees in the admin department, the municipal court department, and public works to gain more efficiency in those departments. And it's been a team effort by the employees, and they're all excited about it. And Carl's helped them put plans together, and we're implementing some of those things. So Carl,
Very
go
good.
ahead and tell them a little bit more about what you want to do, and
Sure, thank you,
we'll go
Tom.
from there.
Carl Hale. I guess I probably need to state that I was born and raised in California, but I've been in Texas now for like 13 years. Helotes, over 2 years now. Love it here. This is a very special place to live, as I told Tom almost a year ago. So anything I can do to help the city of Helotes, I'm more than willing to do. I'm trying to stay retired. It's not easy. But my forte, if you will, is I have a MBA and a black belt in Six Sigma Lean. That's all about efficiencies, effectiveness. But more importantly, it's training others to do the same kinds of things and problem solve. And so that's what I really enjoy doing. So beyond that, I've had several positions as general manager and vice president, lots of engineering, business development on my own. Again, like I said, it's a pleasure to be working with all of you, and thank you for your support.
Okay, any questions? We'll start, Alex, with you this time.
I would say the same thing to you, Carl. Thank you for stepping up and being willing to work on behalf of the city and
Thank
your
you.
community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bert?
Carl, thanks for what you do already. Thanks for stepping up. And you'll be taking my place, and I'm glad it's a male taking my place.
Is that manpower then, if the other was girl power? Paul?
Just appreciate you coming in. Hopefully you won't need your black belt at the EDC meeting.
But I'll be prepared, Paul.
But thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, and welcome. And one other thing I forgot to mention before is I'm going to be the EDC liaison, which just means I'll be coming to the meetings and sitting down there and watching and not saying anything, which is probably going to be very difficult for me. But anyway, I'll be coming, and if you need any help, you have any questions, I'd be, just ask.
Great.
But thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Okay, and again, thanks to both of you. That being completed, then we would take a motion in a second for discussion and action on approving the appointment of Kathy and Carl to the EDC board.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we discuss and take action on item number 6 as written.
Yes, we have a motion then from Fredericks. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Massey. Any other questions, comments, discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor of approving Kathy Oliver for place 2 and Carl Hale for place 7 on the Helotes Economic Development Corporation Board of Directors, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Congratulations to both of you, and you'll report for duty, I guess, next week at the board meeting. And again, we appreciate you coming in tonight. Okay, next up, we have item number 7, which is discussion and action item on a request for a variance to Chapter 66 signs. So we'll take a motion in a second to open discussion and eventual action.
Mayor, make a motion, we discuss, take action on item 7.
We have a motion from Byes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Fredericks. So with a motion and a second on item 7, Bert, it's your motion, so you're up first on discussion.
Looked at the item, and back in, I believe, when was this? September 2nd, 2000, no, wait a minute, let me make sure, I thought it was October. Well, anyway, back in September of 2014, the P&Z recommended approval of a new sign for Tsitsi Plumbing with the following stipulations that the words repair and the telephone number would be taken off the facade of the front of the building. Well, they've had 7-8 months to do this, and they haven't done it. And if you'll notice, the sign that was approved does have the phone number on it. And to me, a plumbing company, everybody else knows it, they're there to do repairs. So I think we should follow what P&Z recommended 7 or 8 months ago and make them follow the recommendation.
Anything else?
No.
Okay, Paul, your second?
So, just looking at the picture, is that what it says to the left of the sign? That says repairs, and on the other side is the phone number.
Yes.
So that's what they're wanting them to take down. And you just have the nice blue sign over the door. Okay.
Yeah, the owners are requesting to be able to leave those 2 signs, since removing them evidently leaves a discolored area visible, and then also leaves holes in the metal that they'll have to patch. But that was the reason they gave for keeping those up there.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Cynthia?
What is the building made out of?
It's a metal.
It's
building,
metal?
Metal siding. Your typical metal type building.
And will paint not work to paint the front of the building after you take and then how do you patch metal? I mean, I'm not sure how those are affixed on there. Is
They
it,
just put a, like an MP3 or something, some kind of caulking material to plug the holes, I would think.
I mean, so basically, you know, the reason that they don't want to do it is because they said it would not look aesthetically pleasant. But I think that if you paint the front and fix it, I mean, you can fix it, can't it?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure there's plugs available from the metal building suppliers.
So before this other sign was put up, that's all that was on the front? Or this Tsitsi Plumbing?
I seem to remember there was a sign there where the blue Tsitsi Plumbing is. It was explained in here. And then when they put the Tsitsi Plumbing, the new sign up, that's when they discovered, you know, the extra holes and everything that would be in the material. But they evidently have plugged them and done what they needed to do behind that sign.
Yeah, okay. That's fine. Yeah,
No other comments?
no.
Alex?
No, I don't have any comments, thank you, sir.
Okay, so no further discussion? Okay, no further discussion being requested by council. We'll call the question then. A yes vote in this case would be to approve the variance. A nay vote would be to disallow the variance. So with that explanation, I'll call for the question. All in favor with a yes vote, say aye. All opposed, say no.
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 Motion is denied, and the variance is therefore denied. On to item number 8. Discussion of an action on an ordinance amending City of Helotes Code of Ordinances, Chapter 98 zoning. And you do have information that Rick sent out today, a little bit of a further explanation. So if we can have a motion and a second to open this for discussion and action, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we discuss and take action on item number 8 as written.
Okay, we have a motion from Massey. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Blue. So with a motion and a second to discuss and take action on item 8, we'll start out. Would you like for Rick just to summarize
Sure.
how this all came about? Rick, would you mind just taking a couple of minutes? I know you sent out the email, but just briefly tell them how this started, the action that you guys have taken at P&Z's request so far, and what we're looking for them to do tonight.
Okay, good evening. Essentially, this came up when we had a issue come before Board of Adjustment on a accessory building, or a type of accessory building, which was a pool cabana. And it started the discussion in the city offices where the property owner was challenging our interpretation of the code. The prior interpretation of the code had been that you could only have, if you were less than half an acre, up to 800 square feet of accessory storage or associated living quarters spaces. And if you were over half an acre, you can only have up to 1,000 or 3%, whichever is greater, of the lot for those 3 types of structures. That's the way the city has been interpreting it for as long as I've been here, probably since the ordinance was adopted. Upon the challenge, we did get a city attorney opinion. Steve Pena was the city attorney at that time, and he said essentially the code, and I agree with him. It's very clear that the way it read was if you are on a half-acre lot or less, you are only allowed 800 square feet for those 3 types of buildings combined. If you're over half an acre, you're allowed 1,000 square feet or the 3% for each building. Okay, so potentially on larger tract lots, I believe the mayor, we were talking today, an acre, approximately an acre lot, you would be allowed approximately an additional 4,000 square feet of buildings broken up between those 3 types.
No.
It's 3,900.
Oh, okay, if we did them each individually, yes.
So it's 3% per type of building?
Under the current interpretation of the
Okay.
code, that is
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
So, we weren't quite sure what to do with this new interpretation since it completely was 180 from our prior thought process, so we sent it to P&Z. And the question was asked, do you want to keep the current interpretation of the code from the city attorney that you're allowed that many square feet for lots that are larger than half an acre, or would you prefer to reinforce, if you will, the original intent of the ordinance, and limit it to 1,000 square feet or 800 square feet, or the 3% for all of those buildings combined? Originally, P&Z was receptive to the idea of, and this was in April, we sent it to P&Z in April, we sent it in June, and then they took final action in July. In April and June, they were receptive to the idea of modifying the ordinance to keep the original intent, meaning that we would restrict it to 800, 1,000, or 300, or 3% combined for those 3 types of buildings. However, at the last meeting on Tuesday, they took the opposite action and voted 4-3 to not recommend to council that they adopt the ordinance, which I'd say I was somewhat surprised by. So that is generally where we are here today. I did email an agenda item request form out to council. Did everybody receive that? that goes into detail as to what this ordinance actually does. And so, again, what the ordinance does is it reinforces the original, what we believe the original intent to be was that it would cap the square footage allowed for those three types of buildings for all types of lots, regardless of size, whether it be less than half an acre or greater than half an acre. The other thing that we do is we do sort of a cleanup of the ordinance, and we go through and just make sure that all the sections that we're talking about, accessory, associated living quarters, or storage buildings, coincide, in meaning the structure of the definitions are the same, and we're just trying to make it clear. Those are essentially what the proposed ordinance does in the time frame there. Are there any questions for me on that?
Let me just add a couple of things that I just worked some numbers today just to help council understand maybe some things that they could have worked this out also, but I just like to toss it out. On the 800 square feet for a half acre or less, that's actually 3.67%. 3% would be 653.4 square feet. So they're given almost 4% on theirs. The 1,000 square feet on a lot larger than a half acre, the 1,000 is going to be the number to use up until about 3/4 of an acre, actually about 0.76. Anything over that, then the 3% will be the larger number. And the way this is written, it would be 1,000 square feet or 3%, whichever is the greatest. And on an acre, 3% is 1,306 square feet, and then you just double that as the acreage goes up. So the 3-acre tract would have 3,900 square feet, which is pretty good size for combined footage for 3 buildings. That was really the points that I thought were interesting to make. The 1,000 square feet comes out to 2.29% of 1 acre. And the only comment I would have if you guys approve this is under greater than a half acre on page 11, where it says not more than 1,000 square feet or 3% of lot. After lot, you should consider square footage. Again, just so there wouldn't be any question that we're talking the total area of the lot, whatever that might be. And I would like to just say that, as Rick stated, a citizen came in and questioned our interpretation of the code. And so most of these changes are just to make some clarifications on the wording. The way I see it, nothing has really changed that much. The areas are the same. The only thing is, we've been interpreting combined areas. This makes it very clear that's what it is. And so the areas are staying the same. It's just combined versus individual buildings. Anyway, it is Cynthia, your motion, so you're first up on any comments, and if you have any more questions from Rick, we can get him back up there.
No, I was at the P&Z meeting, and because I was interested in what was going on here. I am for this new clarification of this ordinance. I was disappointed. I'm not usually disappointed when P&Z does. I usually actually vote on most of the things that they bring forward to us, but I was disappointed in the way that meeting went. It seemed like the 4 that were against changing it didn't really give a good enough reason. I couldn't understand their reasoning. I mean, and I'm the first one to say I don't like people telling me what to do, and especially on my property. On the other hand, I really believe that my rights end when they begin to infringe on other people's rights. And I think that people don't realize how big 800 square feet is in a small backyard. Or half an acre is not, half an acre is a nice sized yard. You start putting 3 800 or, square foot buildings, and now you're, I think like for example in Helotes Park Estates, when someone purchases a property there, they should have a reasonable expectation that there's what they buy, because it's already built out, right? That whatever they buy, they look outside and go, oh, how pretty the landscape, whatever, and there's trees and everything, that the person next door isn't going to build a 1,000 square foot house in the backyard. So anyway, I mean, there is a greenhouse right next to my property line. It's on 5 feet on the other side, and it's 288 square feet. And when they put that thing up, I couldn't believe how big it was. And I could see it from my patio. And we finally put red tip photinias and a bunch of trees to camouflage it, but it took 10 years to do that. It's huge. 288 square feet is huge. So I was thinking the 800 square feet is extremely reasonable. So anyway, I am definitely for these changes to clarify it.
Thank you. Alex, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I completely concur with the need to make this clarification and change. This ordinance doesn't only address a number of square footage of accessory buildings, but it also does a lot of other clarification of what those buildings are used for and things of that nature, which I think are important to the clarification process. I agree. That many square footage in a less than half-acre lot is more than adequate, especially when you consider that this is only detached buildings, not attached. So many of the houses have an attached two-car garage, and this would then allow them to have another 800 square feet of detached building on their property. I think it's more than adequate. The other thing I would say that if we only allow X number of buildings, regardless of those sizes that go beyond that, this actually allows the larger acreage tracts to have a lot more square footage of accessory and outbuildings. A 5 or 6 or 7 acre property, and as the city continues to grow in the future, we may very well see that type of property annexed in. The way it currently reads, they would still only get X number of square foot of building, regardless of whether it's a 5 acre lot or a 2 acre lot. This would allow the much bigger properties to have even more, as would be appropriate for a larger size property. So it actually relaxes it for the large tracts of land. I completely concur in this.
Okay, Paul?
I agree with everything that was said, and I sit on Board of Adjustment, and so I think it does need to clean up so the Board of Adjustment can make their decisions, their definite decisions with that type of clarification. So I think it's needed.
Okay, Bert?
Okay, the other council members have pretty much covered what I believe also. Rick was kind enough to put together what other cities do, and after looking it over, it looks like we are a lot more lenient than other cities are, as Councilmember Massey said about the 800 square foot. There's another thing that we allow that some other cities don't. We don't regulate the percentage that a citizen can use to build a house. They can build a house as big as they want. Other cities limit it to like 35% of the lot and things like that. We don't do that. Some of them don't even allow, they allow a couple of accessory buildings, but you can't exceed 200 square feet, which of course ours is nowhere near that. So I think this is a good amended ordinance. I would like to have council maybe consider this be added, and I was thinking that maybe we should add that no carport should exceed over 900 square feet. And in a couple other cities where Rick did seeing what they do, they limit it to 840 square feet. A 900 square foot carport is huge. I would like to add that just so that it doesn't get any bigger than that, because we don't have any regulations for that as far as I know. Just like to make that recommendation to council. That's all I've got.
Okay, let's see. Cynthia, anything else? Any follow-up?
That sounds, the addition that you wanted to add to the amendment, I'd like to hear what the other councilmen have to say about that.
Okay. Well, let me just toss a couple other thoughts in so you guys can
Okay.
discuss them, if you don't mind. On page 6, I noticed that carport structures are lumped in with garage private, and to me it would be much cleaner to go ahead and separate carport, since people would be looking for carport and not necessarily under garage private. So I would just pull the last part of that paragraph out that starts with carport structures on residential lots and put that under its own definition. The other thing that I was curious about on page 10, under storage building, it says, storage building means a subordinate building without utilities other than electric. The other two types of buildings that are on page 2 and 3, they say, for instance, accessory building means a subordinate building with or without separate utilities. And the Associated Living Quarters says the same thing, with or without separate utilities. So I was curious why we would say without utilities other than electric under storage building, why we wouldn't just say the same thing, with or without separate utilities. Because not everyone's gonna have electric in a storage building. So to me, it makes more sense for consistency to have them all three the same. And the only other thing that I would recommend that you consider, I did notice some of the other cities have a height limitation, and there's nothing in here on a height. So someone could do an 800 square foot two-story storage building. And so you might consider limiting, as most of them do, to either an actual footage height or just a one-story height with allowance for gable roof like some of them did. So that would be some considerations that I would recommend. So keep those in mind. Hopefully you made notes. Alex, it was your second, so Cynthia wants to hear your comments.
Well, that's a lot all at once. With regard to
I can
the
go over
size
it
of,
again if you want.
I think I picked up on it though. With regard to the size of the carport, I recall there was some discussion in the first two planning and zoning meetings with regard to trying to separate carport from garage. And I'm trying to remember the specific details and how that might apply in this edition. Rick, do you recall, because I believe there was some of the members of planning and zoning that were worried about the fact that they have a detached garage, and then they were also looking to do a carport, possibly for an RV or something of that nature. Do you
Yeah.
recall how that went?
The code actually did not include a definition or include any mention of what a carport was or wasn't. And so, under the garage private definition, we added the term carport and made it clear that a carport was not an accessory building. Because P&Z did not want them to be a part of the total,
Right.
the total lot coverage maximum that we're talking about here, the 800, 1,000, or 3%. So they wanted to not have a maximum at all on carport structures.
But if my memory is right, then a carport would not be counted at all in this square footage discussion.
That is,
And
That is
that was
correct.
the way this is written, so that people could have 800 square foot and then have a carport.
that's correct.
Correct.
And so your intent was to not change that part of it, but then say the carport, which is in addition to the 800 square feet, does not exceed 900.
You could define, to make it even more clear, that a carport, typically they're open, maybe a storage unit on one side, so you could say carport is a structure that's open on three sides, something like that to define it a little better, just a thought. Anything else?
Yeah, yes, actually, Mr. Mayor, with regard to, well, first of all, I would agree with the limitation on that. My initial thought was that carport might have been included as part of that 800 or whatever, but if it's not, then I do think we need to set boundaries on that as well. And 800 then plus 900 more does seem like quite a lot to allow on a smaller lot. But I can understand how somebody would want a carport, especially for like RVs and things of that nature that don't require complete enclosures. The question that you had, Mr. Mayor, with regard to the utilities, as I recall, the reason for the specification of with or without electricity was to designate that those may have electricity, still be called storage, but not plumbing. And so the concern was that somebody would then add plumbing fixtures to a storage building and therefore make it different than just a storage building. And I think that may be why there was some separation there. Because we had that, they had that discussion at the planning and zoning meeting also. I believe, Rick, you kind of
Yeah, essentially
would be
they were
walking
concerned
through it.
about two of the buildings being able to be used for habitation and one of them not being able to be used for habitation. So they didn't want any plumbing fixtures in the storage building, because they didn't want people to live in it.
How would that be different than an accessory building?
A storage building is defined, the difference between a storage building and an accessory building is the fact that it doesn't have utilities other than electric.
It just says here, it shall not be used as, for habitation or for commercial purposes, so you could have that stipulation on all of them, except for the associated living quarters. 'Cause
No,
that's gonna
that
have-
is correct. Again, what P and Z was saying was, yes, the code says that you're not supposed to use it for habitation. But how do we actually ensure that you can't use it for habitation? And that's by eliminating plumbing from the building itself. I mean, I don't think including it or not including it is a big deal.
Yeah,
either
no,
way.
I was just looking for consistency, but I don't have any problem with it. Did you have anything, comments about separating carport into its own definition?
No, I don't think there's a problem with that at all, especially if we're gonna try to limit it somewhere else, it does need to be separated. And I agree with the limitation.
Okay, and then on page 11, add in square footage after the word lot.
Well, I think that makes perfect sense.
Where?
On page 11, where it says greater than 1/2 acre, not more than 1,000 square feet or 3% of lot square footage, rather than just 3%, it's just makes it a little more clear. And any comments on height restrictions?
Isn't there something here on page 10 about storage buildings shall not exceed one standard story in height?
I didn't remember reading it anywhere.
Yeah, I seem
Oh, yeah,
to,
okay, I see it.
it's in there
Yeah.
somewhere.
Is that
Yeah.
the same thing under accessory buildings and associated living quarters? Probably not.
No, that is not included in the accessory.
So,
building.
so then we'd look at associated living quarters and accessory buildings having that same limitation, maybe?
Just one standard
One
story?
standard story?
Yeah, I would agree to that.
Okay, so we'll add that in there,
I concur.
okay? Any other comments? Okay, Paul?
I guess the only question is, what happens if you were to put, and I guess if it's attached, if you were to put like a mother-in-law suite, which is a garage with an apartment on top? I guess
Is it attached to the main structure?
maybe by a breezeway, maybe not.
If it's attached by a breezeway, it's an accessory building.
Okay.
If it's attached to the main structure, then it's a part of the main structure. You can,
And so I guess the question is, would it be combined square footage for the upper room and the garage?
Be total square.
Total square footage of the whole, okay. But it could be two-story. An accessory building can be two-story?
No.
Well, the way this
No.
is written, it's not, what we're saying is, do you want all of them to be standard one story? Accessory, storage, and the, associated living quarters.
Yes, right now, associated living quarters and accessory buildings do not have a height maximum. The only height maximum is for storage buildings.
So this would prevent that if you wanted to build a apartment, so to say, on a large lot with garage bottom and an apartment upstairs. You couldn't do that as of, if this was.
Unless they would ask for a variance.
Okay.
Which they would have to go to Board of Adjustment.
Right. Any other comments? Are you okay with those?
I'm
other
okay with the
changes?
carport, yes.
Okay. Nothing?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
so if we're gonna limit everybody to one standard story, do we also not need a height requirement on the roof line?
Yeah, seems like it to me.
So-
That's what they say in those other cities.
Right, I
Because
was
you can
gonna
have
say
a very
25
steep-
feet is
Well-
reasonable, because you have some buildings that you could see, they're gonna call it one story, and yet you may have two levels inside of it, and I know that doesn't sound right, but you can. You can have a
Yeah.
one-story building that has a loft kind of area in it, and you could make really tall ceilings, and you sort of violate the rule of the one story when you go above 25 feet.
There is a definition, a height definition for
Okay.
standard story. And it means one having 11 feet 6 inches between the floors.
And what?
11 feet 6 inches between the floors.
Okay, what about the roof pitch? So you could have a story and a half,
You wouldn't be able to have,
you know, a real steep
yeah, I mean, you
roof.
could have a steep roof to match the rest of your house, but
So it's like Old Town, we have a height, including the roof. Would the same thing not be appropriate here?
When you're
Maybe.
talking about the 11, you said 11.5 feet? From like the floor to the ceiling or the floor to the roof?
from the joist to the joist, or from the floor to the joist above.
Okay, what's a joist?
So
That's the what the second floor sits on.
But we're not having a second floor.
That is correct. That's what I'm saying. So if you're concerned about the roof structure being too tall, but you wouldn't be able to build a habitable, you wouldn't be able to go up into the roof and build a second story. It would have to be a part of the roof structure with the attic.
Right, and many times they have a very steep pitch on a roof and then have an interior space in that rafter area. So you could have quite a bit of height there.
I think you could probably change it, if I may add in there. So the language on page 11 on the story means that portion of a building other than a basement included between the surface of any floor and the surface of the floor next above it. Or if there be no floor above it, then the space between the floor and the ceiling next above it. I think just adding that language, that last portion to story, which is right underneath it.
Story standard.
Story standard means one having 11 feet 6 inches between floors, or if no floor, then the ceiling next above it. Then I think that would probably solve your guys' issue with regards to the height requirement and preventing a maximum height for the ceiling.
None of it's real clear.
This is complicated.
It is.
It's, the whole thing is.
Well,
It's-
and the
I
whole
mean,
reason
that's why,
we're-
that's why there's an avenue of a variance, and go to the BOA for.
Well, yeah, I agree. I think some of this stuff is just gonna have to be settled there, and you're gonna have
Right,
to look.
it's complicated, there's no way around it.
And different yards and yards are different, and, you know, I don't know, it's just, it's
Well,
difficult.
it was just a thought, but at the same time, you have to remember that Board of Adjustment even has to have some guideline to go by. So if everything is real vague, then you're just tossing that into their lap without any real guidance. But anyway, it's up to you guys. So we're gonna forget height.
No, I think we should, okay, it says standard story, 11 feet, 6 inches
Means-
between floors. But since we only have one floor, I don't know, wait a minute. What was the addition that you wanted to add?
Actually, most houses, well, it used to, they'd have an 8-foot plate height, so the ceiling would be 8 feet above the floor. It's been many years now, most of them go 9 or 10 feet. You don't usually see a standard room more than 10 feet unless it's a living room or something like that where they have a real high ceiling. So the 11 foot 6 inches, you could just say standard, meaning one with a 10-foot plate height, and that would be the same. Because between floors, if we're one floor between floors, doesn't
That's-
even make sense.
Yeah, that throws me off.
So we
I
could
think-
just say, story is standard means one having a 10-foot top plate height. And anyone should be able to know what that means.
I would concur.
Does that sound okay?
That sounds like something that I can at least somewhat understand.
And then say with a maximum of the gable roof height of 25 feet from the finished floor.
Is that standard, 25 feet?
It's in some of the others, that's why I picked it. Normally, 25's pretty high.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
On-
it seems,
on a s-
I
On
mean,
a small building, you're probably not gonna have a gable much higher than 6 or 8 feet. So you
I
could
think-
limit it total height to 16 feet maybe.
yeah, because 25 feet for an accessory building in someone's backyard seems very, very high.
So 16 sound reasonable? Just as you guys
I
can
guess the
toss it
question
around?
is, if you want the roof to match what's on the main house, you want it to look very similar, architecturally similar. If they have a high-pitched roof on the main structure, you want it to look architecturally similar. I mean, could you give them that?
Well,
leeway.
most of the time, these buildings are gonna be a lot smaller.
I don't think you're gonna be able to find for every unique situation and every type of home what is aesthetically pleasing or not aesthetically pleasing. I mean, if you say one standard story, I think the code is pretty clear that you can only have one story. Who cares what their roof looks like?
Their neighbors.
Well, I understand that, but at the same time, it's also their home.
True.
And they want to make it architecturally compatible with their home if they have a steep roof. I just don't think that you can make a one-size-fits-all for a storage building or an accessory building or an associated living quarters, particularly at the dais.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want us to go back and research this a little bit, we can.
No, you had enough on those other cities. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm just tossing ideas out for you guys
Well-
to consider.
Can we just leave off the between floors, and we don't have to add anything else to that?
Sure, just a 10-foot top plate height?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just leave it at that, and then let, the roof end up where it ends up.
Yeah.
And you
I'm okay.
realize that that also applies to homes. This definition applies to homes, is in the zoning code.
Well, is that, if it's a standard story, isn't that a standard story in a? These are for accessory buildings, right?
No, the story standard applies to homes, applies to everything. It doesn't just apply to storage buildings.
Okay, well, but we've had, so the original one is 11 feet 6 inches. That's it, the standard story.
That's what it currently is.
Between floors. Yeah, I forgot about that too. This applies to
Okay.
residential.
Well, then, what is the difference between 11 feet 6 inches and the 10-foot top plate height?
Isn't that the joist?
Yeah, that's gonna allow, an 11-inch joist.
Can we just leave it at meanings that have one having 11 feet 6 inches, period? Or is it more clear to say a 10-foot top plate height?
Well, to me, from a construction, perspective, a 10-foot top plate height would make more sense, and then anything, second floor is gonna fit on top of that top plate. It's gonna be a standard floor truss or just a 2x12.
Okay, so what about
floor joist.
houses that have like, it's a one-story house, but it has a cathedral ceiling kind of a,
That's different. That
That's
would be
different.
special in the design.
Okay.
We're talking just a standard definition
just a
of
standard
story.
definition, okay. Then then if this is something that a architect or a developer would understand, then that would be good for me, 10-foot plate foot height, period.
Okay. Anything else? Who hadn't had a second choice? You?
No, I
You have? Bert? Anything else?
What are we gonna go with
We're,
again?
we're gonna review it.
Whenever I was in the fire department, they told us to allow for 12 foot for each story. That was our standard deal,
Yeah.
whenever we had to raise a ladder and stuff like that. So I think 11 feet 6 inches is pretty close to 12 foot per story. I think it should be left the way it is.
Okay, so what's the consensus?
Before you
Typically-
get to
Typically,
consensus,
that's more commercial.
Oh, okay.
before you get to consensus, Mr. Mayor, first of all, I think it's fine if we want to limit it to single story, but I think when you realize that this ordinance is going to apply for places that are not in residential neighborhoods as well. So if I own 10 acres in the city and I decide I want to put a two-story barn up and I'm 500 feet from the nearest border, I guess the only alternative I have is to go to the Board of Adjustment for a variance. Or if I do live on an acre and a half and I decide to build an 18-foot tall little square kind of building to put in my RV, then I'm stuck there too. Is that right? Because the way we've got this worded, one single story, gives me some trouble if I do happen to live on more than just a residential 1 acre lot. And we still have a lot of those properties in this building, in this city.
That's a good point.
And so if we limit it, I get that if we live on a small lot, like where I live in Cedar Springs, most of them are a fifth of an acre in size, and my neighbor wants to put in a two-story, barn in the backyard. Well, other than my HOA probably wouldn't permit it, but still, the city permits it, and I think I would have an objection to that. But if I'm nowhere close to a fence or nowhere close to my property line, then I think of that as being a restriction on that. I just think we need to make it clear that if we're going to, and I don't want to make it complicated, but when you have acreage property, I think we need to be a little more lenient on the height of the building that they could put in there. The other thing we haven't discussed is where we measure that from, because especially when you get into the hills, when the front end of the building and the back end of the building could very well be 5, 6, 7 feet, 8 feet different in elevation, where do you measure that 25? Now, I know we have some standard rules that talk about average grade, but that gets complicated when you start saying roof height and things of that nature. I don't know, I like the idea for the inner neighborhoods to restrict it to a single story for an outbuilding. I just worry that this is being written for those that aren't in that category too, and that we're gonna throw a lot of people into a variance needlessly.
Good point. Cynthia, any follow-up on that?
I sort of agree. But again, if someone comes in and they live on 5 acres and they go, we want to put it, I can't imagine the Board of Adjustment saying, no, you can't do it. You know, and I don't think we're going to have that many people doing it. I think the way our city is going now, we're going to have a lot more smaller lots. And we already have the ETJ, if any of those, you know, that is coming in or that has come in, they're all really small lots. So I think that's going to be the bigger concern as far as that goes. But now let's go back to, if this is the way it's been, story standard means having 11 feet 6 inches between floors, and have we ever had any issues with that as written?
Not that I'm aware of.
So then why are we going to, why don't we just leave it instead of creating more problems?
That's fine.
Yeah, I think we should then just leave it.
Paul?
Concur.
Bert?
You used to build homes, right?
Hmm?
Oh, no, I concur.
I'm fine with it. Single
Okay,
story.
so the only changes then that I heard you agree on was separating the carport definition.
Yes.
Did you decide to define carport a little further as having 3 open sides? Is that a consideration you want to worry about? Otherwise, what was your square footage maximum?
Well, the other cities went 840. I just figured 900.
900?
900, yeah.
So we're going to separate the carport definition and put in there that it shall not exceed 900 square feet? That would be
I think
that
that'd be
change.
fine.
Yeah.
Then on page 11, under lot coverage maximum permitted, we're going to add the word square footage after the word lot.
Yes.
And that's essentially it, right?
Yes.
The only
Well,
So-
you had mentioned, Mayor, under item on page 10, storage building means a subordinate building without utilities other than electric.
They decided to leave that like it is.
Yeah.
And y'all also mentioned adding the definition for 1 standard story in height, the associated living quarters and accessory building. Is
They-
that
they-
included?
I think they decided to just leave that, right? Like it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the amended motion will be separating the carport definition from garage private and adding a maximum square footage of 900 square feet, adding the 2 words square footage after the word lot on page 11. And that's essentially it, otherwise.
So there's 3. There's 3 changes that we're voting
Yeah,
on.
removing the definition and making it separate, including in that definition 900 square feet maximum, and then just adding the word square footage after lot. That's 3 changes. Unless I'm leaving something off. That's what you got? Okay. So, if there's no further discussion on this item, we would look then for Cynthia, if you would like to amend the motion to include those 3 changes. And
I
then, okay, go ahead.
I would like to amend the motion to include the 3 changes that, as discussed. The carport, moving the carport definition under carport, its own definition, adding a maximum of 900 square feet, and on page 11, adding square footage after the word lot, 3% of lot square footage.
And then everything else that's recommended by
And everything else
staff
that
will
was
stay the same.
recommended by staff should
Okay, Alex,
remain the
it's
same.
your second. Do you,
I concur with those changes in my second.
okay. Any further comments or questions? Okay, so a yes vote here will be for the amended motion, which will include those 3 changes, separating out carport definition, adding a maximum of 900 square feet, and adding the two words on page 11 that we discussed. So a yes vote is going to approve this change to the zoning code. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries, and the zoning code, chapter 98 is hereby amended. Okay, that takes us to number 9, and Rick has a short presentation on the new step and grade system that we have. And so Rick, if you would do that for council, please.
Okay, as you know, the revisions to the grade and step salary system are conducted every 2 years by our HR department. And so this coming fiscal year is the year that we're gonna be budgeting for, is the year that we would actually be making those revisions and having them implemented so that we can approve the budget. They are normally included as a part of the budget process, but under the direction of Mayor Schoolcraft, we elected to present to council before we start the budget process this salary system in order to get it finalized, so that we have something to work off of as we go through the budget process. And that, again, the budget will be presented to City Council, is it the first meeting in August? I believe it's the first meeting in August. I did want to give credit where credit is due on this salary system. Credit here goes to our longstanding employee with and the Human Resources Manager, Judy Henkel. And we have a relatively new employee within the Human Resources Department that I did want to recognize. Helena Dennis is here to answer any questions that you may have that I cannot answer. She holds 30+ years of human resources experience working for the U.S. Air Force and the Royal Air Force in the United Kingdom. So there's a wealth of knowledge that she brings to this process as well. The city is entering into its 5th year since we implemented the grade and step system. And we implemented that in October of 2011. If you recall, the system allowed for an implementation period of 5 years before all municipal employees would be compensated, or we would attempt to compensate within their designated salary ranges. I am pleased to report that in the current fiscal year, and I'm talking about FY15, all employees are compensated within their salary ranges. If you recall, in 2011, 9 employees, or approximately 13% of the workforce, were not compensated within their salary range, and they were compensated below their salary range. I'm going to quickly go through the documents that we've included within your packet. The first one I want to call your attention to is the Consumer Price Index document that's on the dais here. Many cities look at cost of living adjustments, and under our system, we do look at cost of living adjustments for those that are above their salary range, okay? In a sense, when we implemented this system, the thought was that if you are above your salary range, that you would still qualify for a cost of living adjustment every year, so that you wouldn't just be stuck at a certain salary over whatever course of period you were here. At the same time, I did want to bring to your attention that the Consumer Price Index, and by the way, we don't have any employees that would fall into that category at this point. All of them are well within their salary range, and nobody's hitting the ceiling, if you will. But I put this on the dais because just a lot of other cities, they look at cost of living and they automatically grant a cost of living of 1 or 2 or 3%. But I've always held I've been of the firm opinion that a cost of living adjustment should be based upon something, and it should be based on consumer price indexes, which is how the federal government looks at cost of living adjustments. If you turn to the second page, or excuse me, the third page in that document, which is page 40 of the report for April of 2015, you'll see that the South Urban, which is what our system says that we should be looking at, the consumer price index from April 2014 to 2015 declined 0.6%, which means that there was no cost of CPI increase during that time period. And the reason I bring that up is during this budget process, when we're looking at salaries, it is my opinion, and it's something that I will work with the mayor on, assuming he agrees with me, that cost of living adjustments shouldn't be given this upcoming fiscal year for municipal employees, but rather we should be looking at merit increases for all employees across the board, assuming that they are warranting that merit increase. So I just throw that out there because our system says that we should be looking at cost of living through CPI, and this last fiscal year, there is no cost of living or CPI increase. Going on to the grade and step salary analysis booklet summary sheet. This document basically summarizes what the system does, or how it gets its information to calculate estimated market values and looking at, and calculating salary ranges. I'm not going to go through this document